It is my pleasure to introduce to you Annie Horton, who will talk to you about Instagram as a helpful tool with grief, bereavement, and loss. When Annie Horton's father passed away, she learned to cope with the loss in part through Instagram. She created, along with the Dr. Kemp Hospice, the Emerging Grief Instagram account to support others in grief and her own struggles. When her brother-in-law, Tony-nominated actor Nick Cordero, passed from COVID-19 at the age of 41, Annie saw an opportunity to help others cope with their own grief over losing loved ones to the virus. Now, without further ado, Annie, please go ahead.
Thank you so much. I just want to make sure that everyone can hear me, first of all.
Yeah.
Good? Okay, great. I just want to say first, thank you very much for creating space around conversation when it comes to grief and death and loss. Whether you know it or not, by just participating in this session right now with me, you are contributing to creating a safe space for people to talk about their own losses and grief. I will say I'm very excited to talk. I know this is a really heavy topic. Death and loss is not fun, but it's something I really enjoy talking about. So thank you for joining me. Okay, so today is December 9th, 2020. 3 years ago, oh geez. Oh no, there we go. I'm sharing this quote with you right now just to kind of drive home how much we don't know how long we'll be here for when our time is up. Human life is fragile. We live in the space between one breath and the next. And on the right, you'll see a text exchange between my father and I, which was 3 years ago yesterday. It looks like a normal text exchange. I love you. What are you doing this weekend? How's it going? And I had no idea that that would actually be the last interaction that I had with my father, because the following day we were busy writing his obituary. My dad was a pianist. He was a great person. He had lots of friends. You know, he was a great father. So my dad died on the 9th. We were writing his obituary basically that same day. We had his celebration of life on the 13th. And if those of you in this group who have lost someone, which I imagine there are people in this group who have experienced their own tragic losses, you know, after the celebration of life is done, you're kind of sent on your way. What do you do next, right? What steps do you take to kind of pick up your life and move on? And I didn't know what to do. I was frozen, and my family and I didn't know what steps to take. I went to go see a therapist, and it was only a few days after my dad died, and it really did nothing for me. I don't want to say that this is everyone's experience, because therapy is so valuable. I saw this therapist that I went to go see after my dad died, and it didn't make it worse, but it didn't make it better, and I didn't really know what to do. You know, if you've experienced loss, you spend a lot of time not sleeping, not eating, you know, you're alone. And as much as maybe you and your family have experienced the same loss, your grief is extremely different. So while you may think you can talk to your mom, your sister, brother, your aunts and uncles, friends and family, you still feel really isolated and you don't really know where to turn. So that's when I found Google, which is everybody's best friend and hated enemy. So in the late hours of the night, sleeping next to my mom at the time, I would be on my phone, Googling, what happens after you die? Which are questions we have, but aren't really anything you think of until you're really faced with it. What happens after you die? What happens when you have a heart attack? All I knew was my dad had a heart attack and he died. He was alone. What did that look like? I was left with my own imagination to think of what had happened to him. You know, am I ever going to eat again? What happens when you lose someone? You know, where do you turn? Therapy, you know, and so on. And it was just this big, deep, dark hole of, you know, where do I turn? What do I do? Because at that point, my therapist, who I had counted on for years, really didn't do anything for me. While I was looking up these crazy questions, I found 2 or 3 women, I should say, who, for me, really were life-changing. And I have to say that I give them a lot of credit for where I am today in my grieving journey. These women are Rebecca Soffer and Gabrielle Berkner, who co-wrote Modern Loss. Modern Loss is an excellent book. In my grieving journey, I really turned to humor, and I really tried to lighten things up by making jokes. We watched a lot of comedy because for me and for my dad, those were really important things, laughter and lightness. Claire Bidwell Smith, who was truly the first person that I came across, um, so smart. Her books are incredible. She lost both of her parents and she is an orphan. So her books and her writing all have to do with parent loss, which obviously was something that really resonated with me. She also writes a book called Anxiety, the Missing Piece of Grief, which was another thing for me that I really struggled with. Naturally, being a millennial, I pick up my phone and I'm like on Instagram all the time, right? Scrolling this, whatever, looking at things. And I thought, okay, if these people are so open on the internet and they have their own blogs and books, they must have Instagram. So I found Modern Loss on Instagram. This is one of the small examples of something that they would post regularly. I thought, this is excellent. I don't have to do anything really except open my phone, use an app that I use literally every day. And I know a lot of you do too. And if you don't, maybe this is a reason to start. Here's another one from Modern Loss. So simple, 3 things, maybe this will resonate with me today, maybe it won't. But in that moment, this is 3 true things. This can help me get through this moment right now. This will pass. It will not pass as quickly as you want it to. You will believe this will never end, but it will pass. So that for me is something I still think of every day if I'm experiencing a grief burst, which is something that if you've lost someone, that you can be going through your day, things can be just fine, and then you see, I don't know, a dog that maybe looks just like your family dog. And you think, oh man, I miss Daisy, right? And you're crying and it's hard and you can't drive. And so you open your phone for a second and these things help you just for that moment. I also found an account called Refuge and Grief. This account is run by a woman called, her name is Megan Devine. She's a widow, and she talks about, she has a lot of hashtags. This one is perfectly normal in grief. When you're grieving, you feel isolated, you feel alone, you feel like your thoughts are not normal, excuse me. When I was Googling those things, like what happens when you die of a heart attack? I'm like, who else is Googling these things? Like, is it just me? I feel so weird. Is this a normal thing for me to be looking at? Is it normal for me to be imagining my dad dying on the floor alone? But perfectly normal in grief, this hashtag can cover so many things. Even if it's not exactly, it is normal for you to be Googling, what happened to your dad on the bathroom floor when he was dying. It might be, it is normal for you to be, imagining or, thinking of your loved one and how they died. So I'm not alone. Another great account that I found was called What's Your Grief? Whenever anybody asks me for resources about grief, this is where I take them. I say, go look at What's Your Grief? They cover everything. So I guess flash forward to 2 years after my grieving journey, I approached Dr. Bob Kemp Hospice, which is a hospice in Hamilton, Ontario that focuses on compassionate end-of-life care and bereavement services for everybody. The great thing about Dr. Bob Kemp is that all of their bereavement services that they offer are free. So you can be, a family that has lost a child, someone who has lost their grandparent, whoever, it doesn't matter. You don't have to have used the palliative services to actually use their bereavement services, which is excellent. Right now, of course, everything is online. So I approached the executive director, Claire Freeman, who was an excellent, amazing person. I said, listen, I found this really interesting area of the internet that talks about grief and creates this crazy support system for people who have lost loved ones. And I think that there's something here that maybe you might be interested in. I said, I might do this. I think I might create this account on my own. Do you have any tips for me? And Claire said, let's do this together. So for years, Dr. Bob Kemp Hospice only provided palliative care. Now, because they are creating a massive bereavement services program, they were interested in taking on this emerging grief project, which is really great. So as much as I want to keep talking about my dad and my own loss, that's not why you're here. Although I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about my dad afterwards. So why is Instagram helpful? You know, Instagram is something that I think has a massively bad reputation for a reason. Instagram is not helpful all the time. And if you, any of you have seen, what is it, The Social Dilemma on Netflix, you know how truly harmful it can be. If you haven't seen it, I would recommend watching it as health communicators. Um, but in very unique cases, Instagram can be really, really helpful. And like you've heard me say, for me, it really saved me in some of the darkest times of my life. So why is that? So the first reason, and I wouldn't say this is the most important reason, but it's because it's free. So, you know, we're in a time right now where I think everybody is grieving. Everyone is grieving something in 2020, and not everybody is able to access supports, whether it is online therapy, in-person therapy, or virtual therapy. It's not accessible for everybody for lots of reasons, and the main reason is because it can be quite expensive. Um, Now, I don't. Again, like I had said before, I'm not saying that this is a replacement for therapy because I truly do not believe it is a replacement for therapy, but it can be helpful, say, if you are seeking therapy and in the meantime, between appointments, or if you don't want to seek therapy like I didn't, it can actually be very, very helpful. Um, One of the greatest things about Instagram is that it's really quick and digestible. And I think from some of the posts that you saw earlier, it's really just a few words. And that sometimes is all you need just to be able to get through the day. Something quick, a little nugget of wisdom from somebody who maybe is a therapist themselves, or someone who is a peer that has also lost a father, son, sibling, whatever. But it's just something small, short, a few words that just to help you get through one moment or even the day or even a couple of days. You might pick up your phone and look at a few accounts, and that might help you for a week. And you might say, I don't need to pay any attention to my grief right now. This is good for now. Maybe in a couple of weeks when I'm experiencing another grief burst, I'll revisit this page and it'll help me just like it did in this moment. This is the biggest one, is community. When you're grieving, you feel alone. And there's really nothing else to say other than you really feel utterly alone and isolated. And like I said before, you could be grieving the same loss. You could be grieving the same loss within the same household, but your grief looks completely different. And even though it's the same person, you may not feel together. So finding a community on Instagram, on these pages where someone might write something like, today I lost my father, or 2 weeks ago I lost my father, I'm feeling this way. That invites conversation from somebody else who may have also experienced a very similar loss. And from there creates a friendship, maybe just a friendship that said, I met this person for 5 seconds the other day on this grief account. You might never speak again, but knowing that that person heard you, read your comment, you feel less alone. And that's all it takes is one person to see that this is a really safe space. There are lots of corners of Instagram that are not safe spaces where there's lots of negativity. This community, this Instagram community of grief and loss and bereavement, is positive. People are sad, but everyone is there because they know exactly how you feel. I think this is another really big one. When you lose somebody, you don't want to be held accountable for anything. When you're in the depths of loss, your biggest challenge every day sometimes is just waking up and getting yourself to work. So having that additional, I don't know, I guess something on you that is making you to be accountable for something. That could be group support, that could be one-on-one therapy, something where you have to show up. That's a lot. It's a lot to ask of somebody who is grieving to just show up. And maybe that's hard to understand, but showing up even in the morning just to take a shower when you're grieving is really hard. So the great thing about Instagram is that it is passive. It's also anonymous. You don't have to tell anybody who you are. You don't have to show anyone your face. You don't have to ask questions. You don't have to answer questions. It's really can be just a one-way communication with something that might actually be very helpful. I really love sharing these quotes because it makes me realize that what we're doing is very helpful. These are just a couple of quotes from folks that have used our account. And I look at these and I think this is why we're doing this. You know, Instagram, sometimes when I say Instagram is helpful, it feels silly, but when I look at my own experience and when I look at these quotes, I realize how useful it really is. And it just makes me realize that we are helping these people even just by scrolling on your phone and double tapping like, and, you know, dropping a few heart comments and a smiley face or whatever. I think it's really wonderful that such a bizarre app can be so helpful for people who are feeling so heavy. So these are a few examples of some of the posts that we share on our page. A really great project that we've started is something called Meet and Grief. We allow folks to share their story and their grieving journey. They'll introduce themselves, share a photo, talk about their grief, share more photos of their family, of their loved one. This is Jason. Jason lost his son. He talks openly, is an advocate for grief. He helps other people out with child loss, which is really amazing. So we share stories similar to his, not always about child loss. I shared someone's story the other week about anticipatory loss, which is anticipatory loss happens when somebody has been told they have a diagnosis and a certain amount of time to live. So you're living while they're alive, knowing that they're going to die. Lots of people reached out and said, this is exactly how I felt when my dad was dying. He was given 3 years. He only lasted this long. So it was really great. Another thing we have here is advice. I'm sharing this post because it actually was one of our most shared posts. People really love to know what to say when someone is grieving, because I think most people don't know what to say. Oops. And this is one of our most recent posts here. This is, an image of a woman. This is how I'm feeling. I'm feeling irritable, feeling foggy, and feeling nostalgic and sad. And that might just help somebody when they see that to think, yeah, today I actually am feeling really irritable. And that's probably because I'm feeling a little bit of a grief burst. I'm feeling really foggy today, and I want to tell people that I'm feeling foggy. So maybe I'll share this. So these are some of my favorite accounts that focus on specific types of loss: parent loss, child loss, sibling loss, widows, general grief support. Obviously, I put my account, and children's grief. I would really recommend everybody to take a look at children's grief, because even though it is specifically for children, this person draws little illustrations of child's grief. And it actually, as much as child's grief is very different from adult grief, I find that this is very helpful just as an illustration to show folks, if you're feeling this way, this illustration might show that. Just some additional resources here. Again, when anybody ever comes to me and asks for resources, these are the 3 blogs that I always send them to, especially What's Your Grief. What's Your Grief covers tons and tons and tons of different types of grief and different types of loss. I will always send people there. Refuge and Grief has a really excellent video on how to support somebody when they've suffered a loss. And I also always share that video. It's very simple, very straightforward, but it is one of the best videos I think that you can send to somebody who might not know how to support someone in loss. These podcasts are really great too. Terrible Thanks for Asking is really funny. Good Morning podcast is a podcast run by 2 women in Australia. The Grief Gang is another one. These are all really great. I just wanted to finish with this quote that I actually found just yesterday or the day before from an account called Empowered Through Grief. There are no quick fixes for grief. However, what continues to be an immense source of comfort year after year are the relationships I've built with other grievers, and the sense of community we have here. So I think that really just drives home this idea of community that we've created in this tiny, dark hole of Instagram and grief that I would really encourage everybody to take a look at. Thank you so much for your time, and I appreciate those of you who dropped in to listen to what I have to say today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Annie. That was very powerful, and thank you for obviously sharing your personal story and helping those who are suffering through the death of a loved one, and don't really have those outlets to reach out and grieve and be supported. And as a fellow millennial, I want to say that I could definitely attest to specific communities being very supportive on Instagram, and so those are wonderful, right? Like as you said, it can be passive. You can do it when you want, and I
Yeah,
also think as time goes on, more and more, this is the way we connect, right? This is the way
totally.
people, especially during the pandemic, which as we wait for more people to add questions to the comment boxes, I just wanted to segue to that and ask, how has the pandemic affected this account?
I think that's a really great question, especially because we are experiencing such collective grief right now. With the Black Lives Matter movement, with defund the police, there is so much going on that is creating such a heavy cloud over people, and I think that Instagram has had to pivot in a way as a whole to be a little bit more accepting and to understand that people are going to share their feelings, whether they're good or bad or maybe angry, and accept that. And I think just even allowing space for those emotions generally is something we need to do. And I do think no matter how complicated and hard this year has been, we have opened up a window for allowing folks to be able to share how they are feeling. And as a society, we have been taught that we don't want to see people's emotions, and we want to tell people that it's going to be okay. And we don't always want to hear that, especially right now. I think a good example is with COVID-19 and with the death of my brother-in-law. People were saying everything is going to be okay, everything is going to be okay, but really, it's probably not going to be okay, right? And we just need to allow space for those conversations when things aren't going to be okay.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a few questions in the chat box. I'll be going on a first come first serve basis. So first is from Kristen Bennett. Kristen, did you want to come on the mic and ask that question?
I don't mind, but I'm just curious because you made the comment and I wrote it down about people feeling a sense of community.
Mm-hmm.
I do worry about negativity sometimes. So I wonder how you sort of manage any type of negative comment, and how do you manage the comments in general? Like, are you constantly managing the account to make sure that it's sort of staying focused on what it's designed to be?
I think that's a really great question. And I've actually thought this myself. I've thought, what is going to happen when somebody says something terrible? And I will say that no one has yet. It's this almost like an unwritten rule that you just don't. When you lose someone, you're already struggling. And the people who are in this Instagram world, this grief Instagram world, it's such a, like, I'm not going to say it's a small community because it's not, because we all lose somebody, but these people are suffering. And I think adding any negativity to their own suffering and knowing they're adding it to somebody else is just something that it just doesn't happen. It's just not, it hasn't happened yet. Having said that, though, COVID loss and negativity in comments is something that people navigate. And with the public loss of my brother-in-law, it was rampant. So it was a bit different because it was not an account that I was managing. I was just watching, naysayers and people who were believing that COVID-19 is a hoax while I was watching my brother-in-law die over FaceTime. And again, I'm sorry that this is so heavy, but this is just the reality of the subject that I'm talking about. That is challenging. But again, that's not necessarily related to the account. I will say that they're both very different, but people who have had loved ones die of COVID and who are sharing their experience after having somebody die of COVID, I do believe that there is some navigating of negative comments that has to be done there. Does that answer kind of?
I guess you haven't had to experience it, but I'm very, very happy to hear.
Yeah, I haven't.
On those social media platforms, it happens all the time, even if our intentions are for the good. So I guess I was looking to see, like, are you always managing the account? Are you always checking all the comments?
Yeah, always.
Like,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I will say there was one time when it was about, I think I had posted something about the election and about how I was surprised that it was so polarized. And somebody had commented saying, you know, why are you surprised that, you know, it wasn't even negative, but it was just like, why are you so surprised? Like, this is the way it is. And I was like, okay, I don't know if you're, you know, engaging in conversation with me, because that's another thing, is if someone does have something negative to say, if it's hurtful, then it's something that I would have to just get rid of. But I'm not opposed to having conversations that are hard, I think, on the account as well, because I think that's important.
That's super fair. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen, and thank you, Annie, for that great answer. It's not necessarily a question, but Fanny did leave a comment, and she says, Annie, this was an amazing presentation, and you speak so eloquently about a very difficult subject. I would love to share your information with our local hospice, if that would be okay, and also connect your account with our hospital's Instagram to share information. Fanny adds that grief anytime is overwhelming, but during the pandemic, more isolating than we can comprehend.
Thank you. That was really sweet to say that I speak eloquently, because I never know.
Would you say, so this Instagram account is for grief, but would you say that is Instagram helpful for any other kind of mental health struggles?
I would say from some of the accounts that I have found through my, you know, Instagram Explore page, I have found quite a few. I will speak to one specifically that is another local community account called Body Brave. This is an organization that helps folks who have dealt with eating disorders. And I find the same with the eating disorder community, that it is generally very positive and very helpful. And people are really open to sharing their experiences. When it comes to generalized anxiety and depression, I do think that that can be a little bit scary. And I'm not sure that I would recommend Instagram or any social media for dealing with those types of mental health diagnoses as I would with perhaps just dealing with grief. And I can't really speak too much on the eating disorder side of things because it's not necessarily a community I am a part of. However, I am very familiar with the person who runs this account, and it is managed very well. And again, I do see that specifically as something that is very positive for folks who are a part of that community.
Perfect. Yeah, great points.